Republicans have spent the last decade plus screaming the words election fraud into every camera, microphone, megaphone, and dinner conversation in North America. They have built their entire political identity around the idea that somewhere, somehow, some Democrat is rigging a ballot somewhere. They've launched investigations. They've raided warehouses. They've subpoenaed innocent grandmothers. So when ProPublica drops a story about an actual, real, fully documented 4 people died from this election fraud scheme that flipped a governorship, what do you think the Donald Trump-run DOJ did with it? They killed the case. They killed it. Why? Because this election fraud sent the votes to a Republican. Welcome to the only kind of election fraud that Donald Trump doesn't care about. It's the kind that helps him. I mean, this is a Netflix docudrama series waiting to happen, and you've got to hear about this. So for some background, there's a prison gang down in Puerto Rico called the Tiburones, and I probably butchered that. I didn't take Spanish in school, but they're the Sharks. They're formally registered as Group 31. And the leaders of this gang were running a fentanyl distribution operation inside multiple Puerto Rican correctional facilities. Inmates were able to buy drugs, and because a lot of them were addicted, the gang made sure of that, the gang demanded payment. And you could pay in 2 ways: cash or votes. Specifically, votes for a particular candidate, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, a longtime Republican, a Trump ally, and now the governor of Puerto Rico. And so how did all this work? What were the mechanics here? Inmates who refused to vote her way got cut off from their drugs. And then inmates in withdrawal got threats of violence on top of those withdrawal symptoms. The gang was telling them not just which party to vote for, but exactly which candidate in the primary and the general election. Inmates had to physically show their ballots to the gang leaders to prove their compliance. And during this little scheme, 4 people died of overdoses. 4. That is in the indictment. The Department of Corrections employees who were already on duty looked the other way. And in some cases, prosecutors say, were active participants in this little scheme. The Civil Rights Commission of Puerto Rico, they tried to send poll observers into these jails during the 2024 election, and they got blocked at multiple correctional sites. They had to get a court order. But by the time they were allowed in, half the day was already over. And in their final report, in dry investigator language, they said they encountered serious difficulties. So what happened? The party of Gonzalez Colon won 83% of the inmate vote. She won her primary by under 30,000 votes. The math, my friends, it doesn't math without that prison vote. So federal prosecutors, they investigated, and they had this thing locked down. They had bank records, gang testimony, drug distribution chains, a clean voting fraud chain right there running the whole thing. They were preparing the indictment in November of 2024, and then Donald Trump won the presidential election. Same time that Gonzalez Colon won her governor's race. And just days later, those same prosecutors got a directive from their bosses at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Puerto Rico. And that directive: drop the voting-related counts. Drop all charges against the correction staff. Charge the inmates only, and charge them only for the drugs. Pretend that that whole vote-flipping part of the operation never happened. So in December, the indictment landed. 34 inmates and associates rung up for drug distribution, money laundering, weapons, 4 overdose deaths. and yet not one single charge for the votes for drugs scheme. That whole election fraud story got buried. Then Donald Trump, of course, took office in January, and the lead prosecutor on that case, Jorge Matos, was personally told by his supervisor to take the case no further. And to quote one source from inside that office, they quoted to ProPublica, "Before the election, it was definitely full steam ahead. After the election, that all changed." So what did this Trump hand-picked Governor González Colón do once she got into office? At her 2025 inauguration in January, she got a letter from Donald Trump congratulating her. She read it on stage. And that same month, she pushed to put up a statue of Donald Trump at the Puerto Rico Capitol building in San Juan, alongside other presidents who had visited the island. And her quote, "He deserves that." So yeah, the MAGA-backed governor whose election was rigged by a prison gang that was trading fentanyl for ballots gave President Donald Trump a statue, or at least tried. And then Trump's DOJ killed the case. Everybody walks, the orange turd in charge gets a bronze statue, all there in Puerto Rico. And so the next time you see a Republican lawmaker on Fox News yelling about how an unhoused guy in Atlanta might have voted twice in 2020, I want you to think about the sharks in Puerto Rico. I want you to think about Jorge Matos being told to drop this case. I want you to think about the 4 people who died of overdoses, and nobody is being held accountable for it. I want you to think about that statue of Donald Trump being assembled in San Juan. And then I want you to remember that the only kind of election fraud that the Cheeto Bendito himself and his Justice Department have ever cared about is the kind that helps them win. And if you think they're going to stop before November, you need to remember, they will fight to the death to ignore actual fraud when it's their fraud. And yet they will burn the Constitution to the ground in order to manufacture fake fraud when a Democrat beats them fair and square. That's why I need you guys to interact with this story. Leave me a comment, hit that subscribe button, and share this story as far and wide as you can, because we're going to be covering this every step of the way to November.
They called it closed, filed away, forgotten. But some truths don't stay buried. Time doesn't erase guilt. A reckoning is always just around the corner. A death in Arcadia. Justice has a long memory.